on the EBRD. Just checking, Johan, you're recording? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. So in fact, this is not the first event we organized together. We have organized business delegations to the headquarters of the EBRD in London, in fact, in 2014 and in 2018. We had planned to do a revisit last year, but of course you can imagine that it was not possible due to the virus still hanging around. We hoped to do it this year, but it will be better that we focus on next year. So in 2020, we would like to visit the headquarters of the EBRD again, and being invited, like always, by David Avarello, who will speak later on this, what he's doing, in fact, at EBRD for our Belgian companies. I would like to emphasize as well that the mission we organized and will organize in the future, we mainly focus on sustainability, green and climate, as these are three hot topics nowadays. First of all, I would like to say that EBRD is being a climate finance leader since a couple of years, and it wants to become a majority green bank by 2025. So also they want to join the Green Deal, EU Green Deal, to be a good partner in that prospect. Also, the Green Economy Transition, GET, which already exists for a couple of years, helps countries where the banks pursue a green, inclusive and resilient recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Green is also one of their 6 transitions quality, but I'm sure that David Avarello will go deeper into detail about that. Now, talking about COVID, you can't neglect it, of course, nowadays. The bank has committed some 21 billion euros to help the EBRD region to counter the economic impact of the pandemic. Also, the member states of the bank have approved, meanwhile, a recovery measures that will significantly enhance its solidarity package. And the bank is also preparing the countries for post-virus era. Let's hope this post-virus era can start very soon. But yet again, I'm confident that David will go more into detail. Anyhow, we are privileged to have 4 more speakers from the EBRD headquarters amongst us in this meeting, and they will share all relevant information with all of us. We will see some case studies on sustainable infrastructure happening in the Western Balkans. We will have a short introduction on the EBRD procurement and an insight on the Trade Facilitation Programme. To conclude the webinar, there will be a short intervention by Didier de Baere from the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency, who will present in a nutshell the Trade for application, which is a very useful one, I might say. So enough from my side. I will give the virtual floor to David, who I would like to thank again for the fruitful cooperation. So David, I will set up your presentation. Yeah, please unmute your microphone, David.
Sorry. Thank you, Arnaud, and thank you for all of you for being present today and for your interest in the EBRD. So my name is David Avarello. I'm director representing Belgium at the board here at the bank. We are basically managing the relationship between Belgium and the EBRD as a shareholder, but most importantly, contribute to the governance of the institution within the board. And the bank, before the crisis we're facing now, has a resident board setup, like many sister organizations. I'm very much aware that the EBRD is not always very well known among Belgian companies and Belgian public in general. One of the reasons being that we do not invest in Belgium like the IB, for instance. So we decided today, when preparing this with Arnaud, to give you a lot of practical information. As companies or consultants or investor, I think it's really important for you both to understand what the EBRD is about, and then to put this information into context with my colleagues who will follow up on my introduction, which is more a 360 kind of picture. What is the EBRD and who owns the EBRD, for instance. The bank is, the EBRD was created in 1991 and very much at the backdrop of the fall of the Berlin Wall. The bank was owned by 69 countries and 2 institutions until recently, when the United Arab Emirates joined us, and is majority owned by EU countries, although it's important to note for you that although the European is in the core of our mandate and our shareholding, a lot of large OECD countries also shareholder of the bank. What I was saying is that the bank is very much a multilateral institution and not only EU institution, which I think makes it also very special. All the countries of operation of the bank are also shareholders. So the core mission of the bank, basically at a high level, is to foster economic transition in countries originally of the former Eastern European communist bloc, but you will see later on the map that it has changed dramatically since then. Upon the creation of the bank, the financing of the private sector was really much at the center of attention. It is so important to underline that the bank has a long track record on the financing of the public sector, and you will see later in Francesco's presentation in the Western Balkans, for instance, in the energy sector or other sectors, we have a strong, also still a presence or strong presence in public and sovereign financing. However, at the core of our mandate, the financing of the private sector is really key. And therefore, we have a very big macro mandate, which trickles down into individual transaction, banking transaction. The bank is primarily, from a financing point of view, a debt provider, but we also do a share of activities in financial sector, energy sector, agribusiness, corporate, and so on and so forth. But as a public institution, and to give you a full flavor of the EBRD, what's the difference between the EBRD and a private lender? Well, our mandate makes a big difference. And although we have many similarities in the way we function as a bank and the way we organize and staff, there are, and you will see later on today, there are quite major differences in the terms and conditionality that we seek from clients, because transition and transition impact is very much at the core of our mandate. From a credit standpoint, just for information, the bank enjoys the best possible credit rating. We are AAA rated, and a stable outlook with 2 of the 3 main rating agencies. So on slide 2, Arnaud, if you could go back to slide 2, you have the map of our countries of operation. Thank you very much. And you can see here that the map is much broader than the countries that were targeted by the creation of the bank of the former communist bloc. And that's quite interesting, because the bank has indeed expanded to countries that could be countries of interest for you as exporter, investor, or consultant. The bank has grown, if you want, following geopolitical developments, such as the Arab Spring recently, into countries that have not been the subject of centrally planned economy. And therefore, the shareholders of the bank have found the business model of the bank relevant to invest in these countries. And today, to give you an example, Egypt, which is a relatively a recent country of operation, accounts for is one of the biggest contributor to business volume in the last few years. So we are today present in 3 continents with very different stories from a transition point of view. And as economic transition is a core of our mandate, we try to calibrate our activities and to invest more in countries at the earlier stage of transition. Although it's important to note, and the crisis in front of us today shows that very much, is that transition is not a one-way street. There are countries which have embarked on very major reforms over the last 10, 15 years, which today with the COVID crisis can see new hurdles or new threat to their development arising, like developed countries very similarly. And also useful to know for you, for information, is that we have a political conditionality at the EBRD that's embedded in our charter. So we are ought to invest in countries which are themselves committed to a number of democratic principles. In slide 3, on slide 3, you will see basically the pyramid of basic principles of the EBRD. There's no hierarchy between the different pillars. The first one being sound banking. We are a bank, and we are a bank that has committed in its charter to apply principles of sound banking to all its projects. We can go into that in more details. That has obviously a lot of refinements given the ownership of the bank and its story, if you will. At the bank's mandate, at the core of the bank's mandate, you find transition, and therefore transition impact is something that we look at very closely in our project assessment. We look at it at project level, but also at the more macro level to see how our countries are doing across cycles and towards our objective of well-functioning markets. Additionality is something I was referring to earlier, means as a summary that we cannot compete with private lenders in the sense that we cannot offer the same terms to a client and have to bring more to the table. We can go back to what more to the table means if that interests you. And last but not least, I think Arnaud mentioned it, the green financing. A bank has committed itself to realize 50% of its business volume in the green economy transition over the next strategy period. That's 5 billion a year. That's a very substantial amount. Obviously, our GET objective, green economy transition and sector, covers a very diverse set of projects from decarbonization, energy efficiency. Francesco can tell you much more about that, but we also do green bonds, so capital market transactions. We invest heavily also in renewable energy in some of our countries of operation. I know some of you participants, your companies are involved in renewables, and we can definitely go back to that very important side of our activities later. I can also talk maybe in the Q&A of COVID response and our crisis response in more details, but I think I've already used up all my introductory time. And I think it would be much more practical to follow up with Francesco, one of our bankers from the energy sectors, which will introduce you a number of project consideration from our sustainable infrastructure and energy activities. And look forward to receive your questions in the Q&A. At the last slide, just last remark, you will see on transition qualities, the kind of things we're looking into project when I was looking into transition, when I was talking about transition and what we're looking into from a transition point of view in an individual project. That's quite theoretical, so I do not want to dwell on this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, David. And Francisco, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sharing my presentation. I hope you can see it.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. I mean, most of the bank has been, let's say, presented. I would be very brief because I think that the important is to discuss with you directly in the question section. So I will give you an overview of the teams. This is our sustainable infrastructure group. The energy team is part of this group. We are in the sustainable infrastructure group more than 250 dedicated professionals. We are operating in the countries that David presented earlier. This is a bit, the shot of what we are doing and what we have been doing in the past in terms of portfolio. The sustainable infrastructure group invests about 4 billion euros per year on our 39 countries of operation. And we count, this year we reach a record of operation, but around 100 and more the operation per year. Our team divided in two sister teams that are covering two geographical areas differently. Has a turnover about 1.6 billion per year. And we have about 35 transactions this year. Actually, we exceeded this 35. We were about 38, 39 transactions. This is specifically our, let's say, flagship program is renewables, where basically, as I understood earlier, one of the major focus and the interest for the presentation of the energy sector. So until now, we finance from 1991, we finance about 133 projects in 30 countries, and overall with a capacity of 8.1 gigawatt, with assets overall above 5 billion. How do we work? Basically, we identify transition gap in our relation with the governments, and for each country operation, we address our strategic teams through our initiatives and policy dialogue. So we monitor the progress against clear and measurable objectives, and we regularly adjust our strategy. What is our advantage? That we have a regional office in all country operations, so we have a very in-depth expertise of what happened in the specific market. We engage at policy level with the authorities, and we also, for example, as it happens, you will see afterwards in my presentation, in some of the countries in the Western Balkans, we are supporting the authorities to establish the first auction for renewables and wind and solar. Where basically we are providing external consultant and helping the government to attract foreign investors and reputable local investors as well. As David mentioned as well, we are preferred creditor status in a single country. We catalyst additional finance from the private sector, and we are very flexible, especially in renewables. We are quite innovative in the way we structure our financing. These slides you will have later on as well with other slides. I mean, we can tell you that we, as David mentioned, we have different solutions from senior debt to strict equity and other hybrids. Beyond this, we provide technical cooperation funds, and we engage in policy dialogue, and we raise donor funds. Our preferred creditor status help us with international investors to tap in the region, especially in the Western Balkans, where not always they're in the map of international investors. I want to move quickly on to give you a snapshot about what is the situation of the energy sector in the Western Balkans. As you can see, after the former Yugoslavia, the investment line coming from 1991 was quite flat. So it means that after that, no major investment were happening in the region. And you can see that the thermal power plant is the dark blue, which is the line that we hope with our dephasing and decarbonization strategy to reduce. The other line, the light blue, it's the hydro, and the red, it's the starting of the penetration of the new renewables. But we haven't done enough, and especially the countries in the region, they haven't done enough. So we are actively facilitating the penetration of new renewables, as I mentioned earlier, with auctions. But before specifically talking about auction, I want to give you, what is our strategy in the region. So we have three main pillars. So the decarbonization, so basically where the renewables actually are the means to replace coal polluting energy. We are supporting, for the time being, the penetration of gas in the region as a transitional fuel, and also we are supporting the Just Transition Initiative as in Europe as a pilot in North Macedonia to create a diagnostic for the areas that are heavily depending from coal mines and thermal power plants. At the same time, we are fostering the development of energy markets by investing in cross-border transmission lines, smart electricity grids, and as well market integration with financing, for example, the first interconnection between Albania and North Macedonia, which will create transmission electricity from Bulgaria towards North Macedonia, Albania, Montenegro, and with the capacity to bring electricity to Italy through the undersea cable in Montenegro. What we do also, we work with state-owned utilities. We provide technical support also to restructure them and to make a bit more, let's say, behaving as a more market-oriented companies. This is our flagship project. We very briefly, we financed the first wind farm in Montenegro. We financed the first 2 wind farms in Kosovo, as well in Serbia. We were the first financing the largest wind farm in the Western Balkans. In Bosnia, we provide support to different distribution company to roll out for the first time smart metering in Bosnia. We organize the first, in Albania, we organized the first auction where basically we auction on public land 140 megawatt of solar. It was a very successful experience. The French developer Voltaria bid it and won with a very competitive price of 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And we are in process of closing the financing for this very interesting, let's say, game-changing activities that we supported. In North Macedonia also, we financed the first large-scale photovoltaic plants on a dismissed mine, and we'll see a study case afterwards. Going to the specific on the investment we have done. So this was in 2017, where we engaged in a very long discussion with the authorities to improve the concession that the authorities had already launched, which were at the time not bankable. So we came afterwards and we started to discuss a bankable PPA, and we managed actually to, let's say, create a bit of a sustainability on this investment flow. And therefore, we managed also to finance the 2 largest wind farm in Serbia. The first one is 158 megawatt. The total project size amount of investment was about 300 million. And we could finance this project with IFC. Just to say that this was according to the old feed-in tariff scheme, where basically the government, through the Elektroprivreda Serbia, which is the incumbent power generation company, was providing a 12 years PPA, which now, according to the third energy package and EU acquis, the feed-in tariff are not anymore, let's say, allowed on this market. Therefore, we are currently supporting the Serbian government in designing an auction scheme for wind, and we expect to complete these activities by the end of July. So we will see, probably you might read on the news if you're interested in the region, that basically there should be an auction for wind coming up in that period in Serbia. The next one also, there were the first 2 projects in Kosovo. After more than 30 years of lack of investment in Kosovo, we managed to support a Turkish company, Juris Group, and an Israeli company, Alight, to close the financing of these 2 first wind farms. The first wind farm was 32.4 megawatt, about project size about 60 million, and I can assure you that was a very challenging, let's say, open market activities, considering not only the closing of the financing in a very underdeveloped financial environment, but as well in terms of logistics to bring the poles and the turbines on sites on a country that has limited infrastructure is as well a challenge in the challenge. And the last study case is in North Macedonia, where basically we supported the first larger, it's about 10 megawatt capacity, is the first large solar plant in the country. The investor is the state-owned utility power generation, and is exactly on a dismissed mine, where basically we help the company to redeem the terrain and the mine site, and we help them to develop this 10 megawatt and additional capacity that will be all here around its old mine, and you can see in the pictures. And soon the remaining piece of land that is not utilized for this plant, will be soon in an auction for 100 megawatt. It's about the capacity, and will attract private investors that are interested in cooperating and investing in this region. So these are my contacts. So I'm looking forward for your questions. I give you back the floor.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for this detailed information. Surely your colleague Guillaume will like to continue on that. He's the Associate Director, Municipal Environmental Infrastructure and Transport at EBRD. So Guillaume, you have the floor. You can share your presentation if you would like.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, bonjour, everybody. I'm trying to share my screen. Wait, it's okay, here we are. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, it works fine.
I assume it's working fine. Okay, so I have a few minutes to walk you through what we do in the infrastructure part of the Sustainable Infrastructure Group. Francesco works on the energy side. I cover in Serbia and North Macedonia, especially what we do in what we call the infra. It's a much broader sector in a way, because we work on municipal infrastructure, we work on environmental infrastructure, we work on transport projects as well. So to give you a little bit of more details about which subsectors we finance and we interact with governments, we work first with municipalities, with supports to cities directly, to finance urban regeneration projects, to finance green projects at the municipal level, and I will develop that a little bit more. We do a lot of urban transport transactions in the Western Balkans. We work on street lighting projects. So these are the main municipal projects we finance. We do environmental projects as well, with a focus on solid waste and wastewater. These are also a big part of our investments. And finally, we work on transport. Transport being railways, being motorways, ports, airports, with a focus on decarbonization of the transport modes. In this slide, I've summarized what we do on top of financing project. One of the main difference between EBRD and a commercial bank is that we are heavily involved in preparation of the projects. So we work hand in hand with the governments, the cities, the private sector to structure transactions. If we start on the top left, we have a PPP unit, which helps structure PPPs, and it is usually a long process. We have internal experts, we work with consultants to make sure that when the choice is made to have PPPs, they are successfully tendered and implemented. We have a grant unit, we mobilize what we call technical assistance when needed to help first with feasibility studies, then to do the detailed design when needed, and once the project is awarded, to support with the implementation. We have finally a policy unit which interacts with governments and the private sector on priorities of EBRD. As colleagues have underlined, a lot is about green now. We want to support the decarbonization of the countries we work in, and a lot of work is done in that regard. And then we have a unit which works on what we call green cities. And green cities is something I would like to spend a few minutes on. It's one of our main programs in the last years. We've invested almost 1.5 billion in supporting cities in our countries of operation. As you can see on this map, a lot of work is being done in the Western Balkans. We work closely with municipal officials to help them design what we call a Green City Action Plan. A Green City Action Plan basically identifies the main investments that will help the municipalities become more green, become more environmentally friendly, provide a better and safer environment for their citizens. So far, overall, the project supported 43 cities. We have 1.5 billion of EBRD and donor finance mobilized already. And it's proven very successful, and we can maybe discuss this during the Q&A and how it works in more details. What I would like to illustrate my intervention now with a few projects, a bit like Francesco did. As I explained, we have a broad range of sectors. So this aims to illustrate what we do in the Western Balkans. Most examples are from the Western Balkans, and I will go through them relatively quickly because there are a few of them, but we can come back to them later on. First of all, with Banja Luka in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we worked on the district heating infrastructure with the introduction of biomass to clean district heating in Banja Luka. This is a non-sovereign project, so this is also one of the key features of what we do. We try to lend directly to a municipality rather than through the state. And here, when we mention GCAP, this means that there is a Green City Action Plan on the side. And as an example here, for instance, we worked with the Austrian government to finance the technical assistance. Another example is in Tirana. We work on the water sector. We have financed investment with a non-sovereign loan of 15 million euro. Again, here the Austrians were part of the story. And there is always, when we work, an investment, but also some support in terms of improving the quality of the public service. And here we work with the company called UKT on their operational costs and how they could reduce this operational cost. We have another example here of water in Sarajevo with the idea of reducing the non-revenue water and help improve the quality of the service. This is a sovereign transaction, so a loan to the state, 25 million euro. We have here implemented something which we really insist upon, which is a public service contract. So basically a contract between the operational entity and the government or the municipality, and which regulates the relationship and helps improve and clarify who does what and what investment can be made. This is about Belgrade, so another country, Serbia, where we work also on water. We can see here something which is similar to what we've done in Sarajevo. We work with the Belgrade Water Company here to extend the networks and rehabilitate them. This is a different example on what we do in Romania. I wanted to insert this example because this is a very interesting transaction where we supported the city to issue a bond, and this was one of the first municipal bonds in Romania. We have been part of this story, and we supported the municipality to refinance an existing bond of 500 million euro. So this is quite a large transaction, which included a lot of work in preparation. A different sector here, transport in Serbia, where we work with Serbia Voz, the entity in charge of railway passengers in Serbia. We have a historic presence in Serbia in railways, in all parts of the sector, infrastructure, cargo, passengers, and this is to finance the renovation of a depot for trains and help them improve the quality of service by better maintenance and better trains for the passengers. Another sector yet, North Macedonia and what we do on highways and motorways in North Macedonia. We have a large pipeline in North Macedonia of motorways, which are part of the Trans-European corridors. These are projects we often co-finance with the EIB. They are very large transactions, and we work here. This is a smaller loan for highway tolling in North Macedonia. It's an interesting project because it's about improving the tolling system, so improving the revenues for the motorway company in North Macedonia, and we included photovoltaic systems in the project so that the tolling stations are more energy self-sufficient. This another example yet, totally different sector, airports, and what we've done in Greece, where we help the privatization of Greek airports. In the Western Balkans, we are part of the financing of the Belgrade airport. I will stop here. The Belgrade Solid Waste PPP, which is also a flagship project for us. It's very large solid waste PPP with the city of Belgrade, where we are financing the SPV, the special purpose vehicle, implementing the project. We worked together with IFC, the World Bank private sector arm, and we've lent 73 million euro for this landmark project, a transaction which is a first in the Western Balkans and which is currently being implemented. Here I'll go through this. It shows that we're also involved in the railways in Kosovo, in Albania, and I think this is a way to transition to the next presentation, and my colleague Johan Bert, who I think is next. We have here a list of the procurement pipeline for my team in the Western Balkans, and I think Johan will explain to you how you can access all that information and how it works from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guillaume, for sharing all this information with us, which is quite a lot. I would like to emphasize as well here, we have taken these cases to present to you which kind of sectors or projects EBRD is financing. So these projects are also taking place, of course, in other regions of the EBRD world, to say. But as you have seen, there are so many projects, and I think it will be very interesting to learn from Johan Bert in what way our companies can be partners, can participate in the procurement opportunities which comes from these projects, in fact. So Johan, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. The presentation works.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me and can everybody see my presentation? Usual questions when we do these seminars.
Okay for me.
Okay, all right. Well, let me start off by saying good morning, goeiedag, bonjour, guten tag, because let's not forget there are 60,000 German speakers in Belgium. My name is Johan Bert. I am the acting interim director of the Procurement Operations and Delivery Department, which is one of the two procurement departments within the EBRD. It does have the benefit that while I'm not temping for one procurement department, I'm actually working in the other, because procurement in the EBRD is like a coin. It has two faces, and both of which can actually be relevant for project work. Let me first start out with my current job, which is governed by the EBRD's corporate procurement policy. This policy concerns contracts which are entered into by bank directly. This is essentially in relation to consultancy. As you can see from this slide, our annual spend on consultancy in relation to projects to support what some of my colleagues have just been describing is in the vicinity of 135 million to 145 million. So that is one aspect of the procurement. The second aspect of the procurement, the other phase, if you want, is handled by a department called PPAT, is the Procurement Policy and Advisory Department, and its workings are governed by the PPNR, the EBRD Procurement Policies and Rules. So what is the distinction? The distinction is that whereas the Procurement Operational Delivery Department, POT, we enter into contracts for the bank with suppliers, including consultants. PPAT, on the other hand, using the PPNR, oversees procurement that is being done by our clients. As Francisco and Guillaume have exposed to you, and David, the EBRD's business model at heart is relatively simple. We provide money to clients through loans or to grants or through equity to buy stuff or do things. Now, because we want to ensure that we get good value for money for our shareholders and for our own business, because after all, we have to make a profit. We want to make sure that when money is being spent to buy stuff and do things, it follows certain rules. And this is where the procurement policies and rules come in. Application of these rules is always a cornerstone of every deal. In principle, even if national procurement rules would apply, such as, for instance, the EU procurement directives or any national rules, when there is a financing by EBRD, same as it would be for one of our sister organizations like the World Bank, like the European Investment Bank, bad example, sorry, like the African Development Bank, our procurement rules apply, not the procurement rules of the country. We are looking at two types of procurement in the EBRD's PPNR. On the one hand, and this is the area that's most of interest to Francisco and Guillaume, we have the public sector contracting. Public sector contracting, if you are in any way familiar with any public procurement or national or public acquisition rules, you will find there is a lot that these have in common with our rules, because they are all based on the same general principles, which is the principles of the government procurement agreement under the UN, under the World Trade Organization. Spent in EBRD's public sector, what we are overseeing is about 2.3 billion in 2019. It's essentially works, and most of that goes through open tender, open competition. Open competition means that anybody who is eligible to participate in a contract financed by EBRD, whether that is directly with the EBRD or with one of our clients, but financed with the EBRD, is eligible to apply. Contrary to some other multilateral development banks, like the World Bank, for instance, we do not limit participation to suppliers which are based in our member countries. In principle, anyone in the world can apply. If somebody sets up shop in Antarctica, they are eligible to apply. We try to ensure as much of a level play field as possible. We try to restrict the number of requirements for contract award to any that are essential, specifically in relation to the eligibility. Now, one reason to exclude a firm from ever participating in a tender for an EBRD contract or an EBRD finance contract is if that firm or that individual has been naughty, which is to say that our Office of the Chief Compliance Officer, or its equivalent in another multilateral development bank, has found them guilty of what we call prohibited practices. You're looking essentially at bribery, fraud, corruption, collusion, and so on, or if they have been sanctioned by the UN Security Council under Chapter 7. So if you're unlucky enough to be in one of these cases, please do not apply. I would like to talk a bit more about the EBRD's consultancy framework for various reasons. First is the one that I am most familiar with, because that is essentially what I am doing. And second, because it is a bit different from what other multilateral development banks or other development agencies might do. As already mentioned, we have separate policies and separate departments which cover corporate procurement, which is contracted by the bank, and client contracted procurement, which is handled by PPAT. We have two separate policies, but these are quite aligned. In both cases, our primary competitive selection is the single stage open competitive selection based on technical and financial evaluation, and we have generalized electronic procurement. I am raising this because if you look at the terms of reference of some of the consultancy assignments that we are putting out to tender, you may look at this and say, well, this is being contracted by EBRD, but in actual fact, I am going to be doing something for somebody who's not EBRD. It could be a government, it could be one of our clients. Francesco, for instance, and both Francesco and Guillaume mentioned that the EBRD is very active in policy dialogue and policy reform in our countries of operation. Even though it's the local governments that have to do the policy reform, EBRD is providing them with its own expertise and also with the expertise of experts and specialized consultants, which in most of the cases are engaged by the EBRD rather than the government. So who engages consultants? It's either the bank's clients, using both using funding. There is, however, an additional layer which is not always visible in what we do, which is to say the bank's clients may also be engaging consultants or contractors or suppliers, but they might be using alternative sources of funding. It could be commercial loans, it could be grants from other donors, it could be their own resources, and these would go under other procurement rules. Could be, if it's private sector, simply basic good corporate governance. If we're talking about a public sector client, it might be the local. It might actually be local applicable national procurement rules. And it is quite possible that on a single project you will have all of these three forms of procurement: bank contracted, bank funded, donor bank financed but client contracted, and client contracted but financed by somebody else. So just to make you aware of that. For consultants, again, this is my little hobby horse because it's what I work in the most, and it's also which is the most distinctive. Normally we do competitive selection for everything above 75,000 euros or more. We can do a single stage if it is a relatively straightforward procurement. We can do two stage if it is more complex. Anything below 75,000 euros we can do through direct selection. Why direct selection? Because we are aware that it takes time and effort for any supplier to prepare a tender in response to requests for proposals, and our view is that for contracts which are below 75,000 euros, the benefits of the additional competition are outweighed by additional costs that comes both for the EBRD, because we have a far more strict evaluation process for competitive selection than we have for direct, and also more labor intensive, and the same goes for the suppliers. As I mentioned, you have already seen a number of opportunities. In particular, in Guillaume's last slide, there were several opportunities. But where can you actually find these on the EBRD's website? If you go on the EBRD's website, you will see a button, Work with Us. You click on that button, you see project procurement and corporate procurement and consultancy services. Project procurement will take you to the opportunities for client contracted but bank financed. Corporate procurement and consultancy services will take you to the opportunities for bank contracted and bank funded. Two policies, two departments. We also use two different electronic procurement systems. I am going to start off with the youngest of these, which is the one that is used by corporate procurement. It's called SMART. It's provided by GEP. It's software as a service. We have just started using it back in October. It is a new system, which is kind of a nice way of saying we are to a large extent still trying to figure out on how to make optimum use of it. But for now, it is operational and it works. If you are looking for client contracted opportunities, you will have to go to ESEP, which is the system which is managed by the Procurement Policy and Advisory Department. The time that I have is not really sufficient to give you a clear overview of how you should register to be informed about these opportunities, but I have provided to Arnold additional slides, which I don't have time to present here, but which go into quite a bit of detail on how to register on both systems. Now, there's a whole lot more that I can and would be happy to talk to you about regarding the details of the EBRD's procurement policy, but I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time for that. If you never have an hour, 2 hours, half a day, 3 days, whatever the amount of time is that you have, let me reassure you, I can fill that with talk about EBRD procurement and public procurement in general. If you are actually eager to talk to me for that for 3 days, I recommend that. I heartily applaud you, but I would also ask yourself if that is really what you want to do with your time. Because I can listen to myself for 3 days, but I'm not sure that anybody else is up to this. But as I said, start out with registering either on ESEP or on Smart. There is additional information which is available on our web pages, including copies of our corporate procurement policy and the procurement policies and rules, which is basically an introduction to how the EBRD is working. Just to give you an idea, EBRD, even though we have the term European in our name, we are not part of the European Union system, and therefore, if somebody thinks that that the European procurement directives apply to our projects, they do not. We have our own standalone policy. That is all that I wanted to tell you in the 10 minutes that were allocated to me, and I will now happily pass on the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Johan, for sharing this information, which was straight to the point, and you did it indeed in 10 minutes, which is quite an endeavor and a challenge. But I'm very happy to hear from you that you are always open to go into more detail in another session we could organize later this year, specifically on this topic, procurement, as we really would like to have more Belgian companies in the scene of procurement opportunities at EBRD. There is no reason why they shouldn't. Compared with our neighboring countries, they are far more active, and I'm confident that also our companies should or need to be more proactive and active and try to go for it. But yet, let's do that in a couple of weeks or months. We will do that later. Now it's Anna Brood. She's the principal banker at and works with the Trade Facilitation Programme at the bank. So Anna, please introduce us to this TFP program, which is also very interesting for our companies to learn more about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Let me start by first sharing my presentation on the screen. 1 second. Arnold, if you can confirm that you can see it, that would be great.
Yes, it works. Perfect.
Thank you. So I'll give you a short overview of who we are, what the Trade Facilitation Programme is, and how we can support also trade between EBRD's countries of operation and Belgian companies. So the Trade Facilitation Programme is part of the Financial Institutions Department of the EBRD, and as such, we work only with banks in our countries of operation and not with importers and exporters directly. And the purpose of the program is to promote trade, foreign trade, to, from, and amongst EBRD countries of operation. And we do it in different ways. And let's start with the main one, is to help local banks in EBRD countries of operation to create a track record with foreign banks. And we do that by issuing TFP guarantees that cover up to 100% of the commercial payment and political risk arising from trade finance instruments that are issued by issuing banks in EBRD's countries of operation to confirming banks all around the world. Another way how we support trade is to provide short-term liquidity to our issuing banks for on-lending to the importers or exporters to pay for these foreign trade contracts. And last but not least, we also provide advisory service trainings in order to support capacity building in our countries of operation in the area of trade finance. We have an award-winning e-learning program, which has been very well received all over our countries. We have more than probably 5,000 graduates already so far. We also train banks in starting with very basic details or technicalities of trade finance, ranging all the way to compliance issues in the area of trade finance. And during this presentation, I will focus only on the first kind of pillar of our program, on the TFP guarantees, as it relates more to our discussion here today. So how does it work in practice? It all starts with a relationship between the buyer and the seller. They negotiate on the trade contract, and usually in order to secure the payment, they put in as payment terms a trade finance instrument. This would be for the seller the most secure form of payment. With that signed contract, the buyer would then go to his bank and ask for them to issue a trade finance instrument in favor of the seller's bank, the confirming bank in this case. The banks start negotiations on the trade finance instrument, but the confirming bank in one of the exporter's country may not have sufficient limit on the other side, on the one of the EBRD's countries of operation. On the issuing bank, it may have doesn't have any risk-taking capacity on the country, or maybe the limit for that specific bank is full, or potentially they do have limit, but the transaction is either too large or the tender exceeds their maximum risk-taking capacity. So then the issuing bank can suggest to the confirming bank that they will ask for an EBRD guarantee, and thus the confirming bank can take that risk off their books as it has an EBRD guarantee, confirm that instrument to the seller, and then the seller is able to ship the goods to the buyer. What are the benefits of a TP guarantee? Well, if we focus here on the confirming banks and exporter side, for you, it's of course 100% guarantee of payment. We know that even if the buyer doesn't pay, even if the buyer's bank doesn't pay, the EBRD will pay. It provides with additional export opportunities to regions and countries which the exporter may never have considered because of the risks involved. Of course, it's optimization of costs also for the confirming bank because they receive EBRD's AAA rated guarantee, and the possibility to offer them more favorable terms to the seller, either with a longer tenors, as I mentioned, or being able to support transactions of larger amounts. Our program has been running for over 20 years. We currently have over 120 issuing banks in EBRD regions of operations. We are only active in 30 of them. So in some countries, we are, as a program, let's say, not as needed. And mostly those are the EU countries, with a few exceptions like Greece. And we've issued over 27,000 transactions over the years. And this is also one of the reasons why we work with banks directly, not with importers and exporters, because this way we can support much more business, whereby if we worked with importers and exporters and took their risk vis-a-vis the risk of the banks, we would have to analyze each and every client separately. We've supported over 22 billion euro worth of trade. And you can see on the right, kind of in the graph, how our business volumes have been growing every year. Since the beginning of the program, there were only 2 exceptions, 2009, following the global economic financial crisis, and in 2015, following the sanctions that were implemented on Russia in 2014. Last year, we saw significant growth. Our business volumes increased by over 800 million compared to the year before. And mostly, of course, this was as part of EBRD's crisis response. We were one of the main kind of pillars in the crisis response. We opened more limits to existing EBRD partner banks. We increased limits, and this was all done to try and reduce the effects of falling supply chains that were happening because, of course, closed borders and all the effects of the coronavirus. If we look at exactly kind of as on trade with Belgium, we have the following confirming banks available. Some are local banks, some are foreign subsidiary banks, which are located in Belgium. And since 1999, we have supported over 800 transactions for almost 700 million euro worth of trade with Belgium exporters. So how do you actually go about requesting an EBRD guarantee? So if you are selling to the EBRD region, as I mentioned, the TFP guarantee can help you to secure the payment from your foreign buyer. So first, you would check with your buyer that they can work with one of the issuing banks on a list of issuing banks, which is available on our website. You would then also check that your bank in Belgium is a confirming bank. You would need to make sure that the goods in question are not on the environmental and social exclusion list. You would determine and ensure that the buyer is willing to issue a trade finance instrument to secure the payment, and then that they're willing to also use a TP guarantee, which they would discuss with their local bank. You would negotiate on the maximum tenor that is needed for the transaction and which EBRD is able to cover, and check, of course, with your banks the level of fees involved. And here I have a few examples of how actually the program works in real life. In this case, we had also trade with Bosnia and Herzegovina. So a Bosnian company signed a contract for the supply of electrical control panels from Belgium. The Bosnian bank issued a letter of credit in the amount of 60,000 for a tenor of 1 year. That was confirmed by the Belgian bank after they received an EBRD guarantee covering 100% of the political and commercial risk. Here we have a trade with North Macedonia, where there was an import of pesticides from Belgium into North Macedonia. The Macedonian bank then issued a letter of credit for just over 225,000 euro for up to 3 months. Which was supposed to be confirmed by a Belgian bank. The Belgian bank confirmed the letter of credit after they again received an EBRD guarantee guaranteeing 100% of this transaction. In this example, we have trade with Serbia. It was for the import of some lighting equipment from Belgium into Serbia. The Serbian bank issued a letter of credit in favor of a Belgian bank. EBRD guaranteed the transaction, and then the Belgian bank was able to confirm it in favor of the beneficiary, the exporter, and the trade took place. Here is a very recent transaction and involves Lebanon. At the moment, no bank in the world is able to take risk on Lebanon. We are the only institution worldwide which is still able to support some trade with Lebanon on reduced capacity, of course, but especially for essential goods, as in this case, which was medical equipment, medical products from Belgium to Lebanon. A Lebanese bank issued a standby letter of credit for 600,000 for 6 months. The Belgian bank advised straight away that they will only be able to support it with an EBRD guarantee, which we provided for 100% of the transaction, and then the trade took place. Here we can see a bit of a larger transaction and longer tenor. It was with trade with Belarus. It was machinery that was exported from Belgium to Belarus for textile machinery. The Belarusian bank issued a letter of credit for almost 5 million euro for a tenor of 2 years. And we guaranteed 100% of the risk to the Belgian bank in order for them to confirm it to the beneficiary and for them to export the machinery to Belarus. And one more, as our colleagues previously mentioned, of course, one of the biggest agenda in the bank is green finance and green economy. This is also very important under the Trade Facilitation Programme. And here's a very nice example of such a transaction. A Ukrainian agricultural company was buying agricultural machinery from Belgium. The Ukrainian bank issued a counter guarantee in the amount of 115,000 euro in favor of Belgian bank. EBRD guaranteed 100% of the risk, and the Belgian bank was able to confirm it to the exporter and the trade to take place. So those are just a few examples, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Anna. Yet again, very interesting to see all these examples, these case studies with Belgian companies' involvement. So to show to the people, the companies participating to this webinar, that EBRD is very much open to assist also our companies in trading with companies based in the EBRD region. So we will surely come back to you during the Q&A. I'm sure that there will be some questions for you. Next, the last speaker I would like to give the floor to is Mr. Didier de Baren. He is Deputy Director General at the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency. So Xavier, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arnoud, and thank you for the other speakers.
Didier, I'm
That's okay, I'm used to it. I know the linkage comes from an old Belgian television program, so this is an insider. No problem, Arnoud. Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you for the other speakers of giving this excellent overview on how the EBRD works, so what the possibilities are. And as you rightfully said, I think that Johan and Anna and all the other speakers, they show how important it can be for our Belgian exporters to stay well aware of the opportunities, to be involved, to see whether they can get their advantage and cooperate in the EBRD system. And this is where we can play a little role. And it's on that little role that I would like to elaborate right now. Because how does one get informed about these kind of opportunities? And maybe even more important, how can one be reminded when he lost the email, the original email, out of sight? How can he be reminded of the existence of the possibilities? I hope that everybody is seeing my presentation now.
It's perfect, Didier.
That's excellent. So maybe first a little word on the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency as such. This event, this webinar is organized by FIT, which is the Flemish export agency. We also have Hub Brussels for Brussels, of course, and AWEX for Wallonia. Now, they have the fullness of competence as far as foreign trade is concerned in our federal state. However, from time to time, there are some common interests, and therefore, Belgian Foreign Trade Agency was created to meet those common interests between the three regional agencies. The most important and the most well-known token of that is the economic missions to third countries, presided over by Princess Astrid right now, and before our Belgian King, who is, by the way, our President of Honor. Now, a second thing that is a common interest for all is to get as much Belgian companies involved in public procurement, and that is not always easy. So, how does our system work, the Trade for You system? Well, we have a database, and in that database, the full registration details of the company are gathered with precise contact details, and moreover, of course, with your market. I took the example here, and I didn't know it up front, but with the green energy, the solar energy producing equipment seems to be fitting very well. Now, how does the system work? Besides, for one reason or the other, I'm not able to shift my slides anymore, which is bizarre. Okay, so we gather worldwide from more than 100 of sources daily business opportunities, but only as far as public procurement is concerned. What does that concern? That concerns quite obviously the tenders and projects which are launched by governments inside and outside the European Union. So this is worldwide. Even the government of Bangladesh is included, the government of the Philippines. So wherever you name it, Uruguay, Paraguay, we all try to gather those sources and get all those public procurement opportunities together. The same goes, of course, for the opportunities launched by and the international projects launched by the EBRD, but also from other multilateral organizations, as was already mentioned by one of the previous speakers, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, and a number of other international institutions. Those public procurement opportunities are linked in an automatic way to the company profile, and if they are within your sector you will get an automatic notification on a Trade for You mobile application. So it's not an email coming in while you're in the middle of a business and you might forget about it, and all of a sudden you remember, oh, we had this perfect opportunity for ourselves. You look and then you see, oh, okay, the deadline has expired, we cannot participate anymore. No, you have a mobile application, so the tender or the international project of interest, you can look at it at any time, at any moment, and just by opening your mobile phone. And then in this mobile application, you have a short description of the project or the tender as such. And then you have a possibility of undertaking several actions. You can ask with us for more information. You can even ask to us whether we, making use of the Belgian diplomatic posts and the commercial attaches of the 3 regional export agencies, that we go look for you for the complete tender documents. I know that with the EBRD, this is better structured, but that is not always the case, especially when you're talking about African markets or whatsoever. And we can deliver you that. Lastly, you can also decide, when you consider yourself not being a big enough company, and with our a large number of SMEs in Belgium, that is often the case, but you can decide that you launch a hint on the mobile application, and that you are informed about other companies with whom you can form eventually a joint venture in order to participate to the opportunity or the tender. Besides that, there are a couple of other tools that you can look upon in the mobile application, which is some large economic news. There's an example. ECOWAS is organizing a sustainable energy forum, but also legal alerts. From time to time, new measures are taken by governments worldwide that have an impact on the free influx or outflux of goods. It might be important as an exporter that you remain fully aware of that. As I said, you can ask for the bidding documents through our services. And lastly, but not least, if you think that more information and more support is necessary, we do have a full team which is there for you and which you can contact. If you are a Flemish company, quite obviously, we will put you in contact with the relevant people within FIT. I'm sure that FIT will be informing you already about the opportunity, but the added value of our system is that you can consult it at any time using a mobile application, and which gives you on a daily basis notification when something new is happening worldwide. As I am the last speaker, I can imagine that everybody will be happy if I can say that this is the end of my presentation and that I can give the floor back to Arnold.
Yes, thank you very much, Didier, for this information again. Then the floor will be open for questions. I've seen already some questions coming in the chat box. And the first one I would like to refer to is to David. Perhaps you can answer on the first question here. I would imagine it will be a positive one. The question was simple. Is EBRD also financing healthcare infrastructure projects? David or Johan, perhaps David, you can take that one. Johan, you can unmute yourself because it seems, or David, you are still.
Perhaps I'm not the best question.
If you want, Johan, I can take it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
you.
Here.
Was I was going to say.
Exactly. Thank you. So yeah.
Okay, you can continue, please. Thank you.
Okay. So we do not have a very large presence in healthcare. The way we do finance healthcare is through facility management PPPs. So we have had a large program in Turkey of financing hospitals under a PPP procurement. So it means we do finance the infrastructure of the hospital, but we do not interact with the healthcare part of the project. So it's a typical building facility management approach. We've tried to develop that in Romania. We are trying to push it in some countries in the Western Balkans. However, it's fair to say that it's more complex when the program cannot be very large, as it is the case in Turkey, where you have, I think, at least 15 hospitals which are built under a PPP procurement process. And so that's where we stand. There was an exception to that last year, but that's really the exception confirming the rule. Given our strong involvement in Turkey with the hospital PPPs, we were requested by the government of Turkey to support them during the COVID crisis with financing some healthcare investments, and which we did on a very exceptional basis. The other way we finance healthcare is through our manufacturing and services team, which finances sometimes private companies providing healthcare services.
Arnaud, I can see now that it does allow me to unmute because I couldn't unmute earlier. Basically, Guillaume, I think, answered quite extensively already the question. What I just wanted to add is that we had a very interesting conversation, obviously, around healthcare during the year, also at the board and with the management of the bank. And this we had a couple of transactions which were very exceptional in their nature, and also the financing structure, which we approved, one of them in Turkey for purchase of medical equipment. And Guillaume alluded to that. But for the rest, I think Guillaume's answer was pretty complete. Thank you.
Okay, David, you can continue because there is another question which can be for you again.
Yep.
That's an important question, in fact, or for companies who are not aware of, about the opportunities working with EBRD. What's in fact the difference with working with a normal bank? EBRD is not an abnormal bank to say, but there is quite a difference between commercial standard banks and EBRD. What's the difference in interest rates, in guarantees and facilities and so on? In a nutshell, because it can...
Yeah, it's a very wide question. I think I would ask also Francesco and Guillaume maybe to jump in, but I think they are, as I alluded to in my introduction, a set of key requirements, advantages, but also requirements that entails working with EBRD. To compare us to a commercial bank is very difficult because we bring much more to the table, but we ask much more to the table as well from our clients. You can benefit also through the EBRD. I think all the speakers alluded to that, from assistance in structuring your projects, which you might not be finding in the outside world. At the same time, our pricing structure, I think Francesco and Guillaume are most suited to answer that. But we basically, it's really embedded in our mandate, our comparison with commercial banks, in the sense that we cannot crowd out private lenders. So we cannot offer, and it's, as we are a bank geared towards private sector transition, it's very understandable that we cannot provide or compete with the private sector in our countries of operation. We have to, obviously deploy a mandate which is geared more towards transition and transition impact of our project. So it's difficult to answer one size for all answer on that question of comparison. But I think Francesco and Guillaume, if you want to jump in, I think there's lots of positive externalities that the client can benefit from working with EBRD that you can't find in the private sector. It depends on the type of project, of course.
Francesco, I think you raised your hand.
Yes. Just want to, because I need to join on the call afterwards, but I want to reiterate what David say. I mean, in our mission, we support the private sector and the private banking sector, and we need with our loans to be additional to the private sector. So this means that, for example, in renewables in the Western Balkans, we are indeed additional because we can provide much longer tenor than other commercial banks. And then we can structure, we have the flexibility to be, additional and to structure our loan in a way that we involved also the private sector. And actually, we have a department that will provide contact with commercial banks. Usually for private sector, so for private project, we can finance up to 35% of the overall cost, or 50%, let's say, on the debt side, and the other 50% can come in a parallel way or AB loan, which basically we syndicate the half of our let's say, or the overall lending portion to commercial banks, and in that case we are price takers. But we can still take our, let's say, additionality in terms of providing longer tenors. For example, in many markets in the region, it's difficult to find local commercial banks that they can lend for 15 years, as we do for project financing. So we are there to stimulate the commercial bank to come along with us, and eventually, if they accept our general terms, then we are also price takers on that condition. So maybe I leave it to Guillaume to discuss about the sovereign debt, because it's a bit more common for infrastructure and municipality.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a very broad issue, and I'm happy to answer maybe more specific questions you may have in that regard. I think David and Francesco answered very well, but yeah, if we summarize, we have an approach which aims at bringing private sector on board, or helping the public sector being more efficient, being more commercial in its approach, and being more green. So we have a different mandate. We have different incentives in terms of interest rates, in terms of maturities. We tend to work on a commercial basis, so that's where we are closer to our commercial partners. But this is something we look at on the case by case. So yeah, happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Yes, thank you very much, Guillaume. In fact, there is another question which I could direct to you, as it concerns Croatia. There is a company wanting to know if there are opportunities in the field of sustainable agriculture, energy, mobility in the region of Croatia, and to improve the renewable energy production in a way over there. Would you elaborate a bit on that, please?
So, well, it's again here. I mean, sadly, I'm not directly involved in Croatia. I know we have a lot of activities in Croatia, which is a big country of operation for us. I think a general comment on inquiries you may have about specific activities in specific countries is that we have a strong team on the ground in every country we work in. So we have large offices. In Croatia, Victoria Zinchuk is the director. She leads the business there, and people in offices on the ground are always extremely keen on interacting with the private sector and foreign investors, and to direct them on what they could do, which projects are ongoing, what policy dialogues we are conducting, and sometimes help facilitate meetings or give you the name of the right person. Okay. I think here you're touching, you're talking about different sectors together. I don't know if Francesco is still here and wants to discuss in terms of energy.
For another meeting, Guillaume.
If I may, I'd like to I'd like to follow up on something that Guillaume said concerning the resident offices. I think it's really important to emphasize that for the public. We have a business model with a very wide network of resident offices, as Guillaume mentioned, which is really staffed with professional people that are close to the ground, close to the business community and live in the country. These are not rep offices. Of course, not all resident offices are staffed with all suits of the different departments of the bank, but we have I think a lot of added value of our business model is embedded in that distribution of competencies on the ground and in the HQ. And that can help a lot, I think, investors, entrepreneurs, or consultants who have first time or are regular to a region or first time experience in a country to basically knock on the door of EBRD resident offices, because it's I think, a very important point.
Okay, exactly. But I just wanted to mention that Francisco is also there, open to connect directly with the company. Lucy Evers, she is called, but he had to leave for another urgent and important meeting. So this can continue after this webinar. Then there is a question very relevant again. There is a company who is more into the subcontracting, and he wants to learn more about opportunities. In which ways can he or can he in this case learn more about projects which are being awarded? I presume this is something also that Johan Bert can answer shortly, as this is more into procurement opportunities.
Right. Just a question in relation to subcontractors. We try to I emphasize we try to publish our contract awards on a regular basis, because you are talking about subcontractor and supplier of material. I am assuming that you are most interested in works and goods contracts rather than consultancy. So you're looking at that for the procurement policy and advisory department, which runs the client contracted. We do try to publish. We do try to publish our winners and a shortlist, if it's applicable, as much as possible. Now, I'd be lying if I said that this was always fully up to date, because we have to do this manually. Our systems aren't full. Our IT systems aren't fully integrated, in the sense that if there's a winner, you press the button and the winner automatically gets published. If you are interested in a bit of a longer term view, however, if you go on the EBRD's procurement website, you will find on PADS, so Procurement Advisory Department site, their annual report. In their annual report, they have a full, and one of the annexes, they have a full list of contractors who are awarded the contracts, and those who have participated in the tender. So participated in the tender, but did not win. It's relatively manageable, because on a yearly basis there's about 300 tenders, but those are all in public sector. We have a lot less of a role when it comes to the private sector, which isn't subject to any public procurement rules. So we don't really have visibility over that one. And we shouldn't forget, because we are talking a lot in procurement about the public sector. EBRD is essentially a private sector oriented bank. About 80%, 75 to 80% of our annual business volume is in private sector. And on that one, when it comes to the contract awards, we have only very limited visibility. So any contract awards that we may publish will all be in the public sector. Arnaud, I think you're on mute if you are talking.
Okay, sorry, it can happen. That's the story of virtual meetings. Indeed, David, did you have anything to add to this information? I think this was quite comprehensive. I would like to conclude with a final question, which is something an open question, but I'm curious what the answer could be or will be, because the bank indeed recently had the opportunity to have an extra member on board, the United Arab Emirates. But that will be a member. But are there any ideas or plans for extending the EBRD region? I mean, Are there any more countries? Will be there more countries where there will be operations going on for the next few years? Are there any things you catch in the at the EBRD office? What's going on there?
Yes, I will take that up. I think concerning the geographic mandate of the bank, I explained earlier a little bit the context and the previous extension of countries of operation. There were a little bit the consequence of geopolitical events. Here at EBRD at the moment, we have had done some preparatory work to embark potentially on further extensions. But at the political level, the subject is not really ripe at the moment. They could be in the future. This is no secret, but I think the bank has commented upon the fact that it's looking at countries in sub-Saharan Africa. That is public information. However, I think, and the speakers, the audience today might not be totally in tune with this kind of discussion, but that's part of a much wider reflection on the architecture of development in the EU and beyond, and the distribution of work between notably the EBRD and the EIB. And therefore, it's a very early stage discussion. But the direction in which the EBRD is looking is south, and for different reasons that we could discuss maybe at a different point. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, David. I think we can round up, and I would like to thank all the speakers today for sharing all this information. It has been quite a lot of information. I'm confident of that, but that's the reason why we will also send all of you the presentations and the recorded webinar. And this is in fact the start of a new project. This is the end of a project, so we are quite sure that for the next few months and years we will try our best to improve our cooperation with the bank. I'm sure we are always happy to visit you in hopefully in post-COVID times, and hopefully it will be soon again, like we did in the past. It was always trade on and very nice to have very good B2Bs as well with the bankers at the headquarters in London. So we are looking forward to a physical meeting, hopefully very soon. But yet again, thank you very much, all of you attending and presenting at this webinar, and hope to see you soon in real life again. Thank you very much and enjoy the day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.